Right.
Yeah.
Now, it's International Women's Day today. We did talk about it yesterday, but I thought, in light of the fact it is International Women's Day and women have spent the last few days, they're parading around Tunbridge Wells, I saw on the news today, going on about how wonderful the suffragettes were. Well, you know, the fact is women should have always had the vote. They should never have not had the vote. But celebrating the suffragettes I have a bit of a problem with because some of the things they did were very, very violent.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, people say, well, we had to make our point. Well, then don't complain when other people take the law into their own hands and start using violent methods. It's not on. You can't, you know, it really isn't on. It's not acceptable.
But it works, doesn't it?
Absolutely works.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, we thought we'd talk to the leader of a new political party, or maybe not so new. It's called Justice for Men and Boys. And the guy in charge is Mike Buchanan. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening, James.
Maybe it would have been better just to be Justice for Men because it's a political party. Boys are not old enough to vote.
No, but they're old enough to suffer, and they suffer in many areas, starting with male circumcision. They suffer in education. They suffer the loss of their fathers in the divorce courts.
Yeah, but not always, but yeah, sometimes they do, sadly. But I don't think it's generally thought that boys suffer as much maybe as girls because of the stereotyping.
Well, I'm not sure what stereotyping you're talking about, but if we just focus on the on the issue of access to fathers, of course both girls and boys suffer. But it's the family courts are designed to strip families out of fathers. They are just outrageous in how they operate, and it's one of the reasons that the male suicide rate is so high. Suicide is the number one cause of death of men under 50 in this country.
Some might say, yeah, I know it is, and it's a very sad fact, and I know well through people in my own family what it's like when a divorce happens, and some women are absolutely despicable about it as well. But some men behave appallingly, you know. Some men really don't know when to shut up.
No, but I mean, the reality is that 95% of the parents who are denied access to their children following divorce are men, and it's a major driver, as I say, of the male suicide rate. I mean, who can really be surprised that so many men, end their lives when they're denied access to their children?
Yeah, but sometimes men threaten to do that to try and get access to their children, and I would say that if a man threatened his partner, I'm going to kill myself if you don't let me see the children, then he's unbalanced and he shouldn't be let anywhere near the children until he's healed.
There could be a danger to the children if they
absolutely.
Yeah. I've got to say, James, I've never encountered a case like that, and I'm sure if a man threatened suicide so as to see his children, nobody would take the blindest bit of notice.
But the suicide for men under 50s isn't to do with that.
Well, I think if you threaten suicide, people do take... Hang on. I think if you threaten suicide, people do take notice.
I mean, if you're a woman, probably, but if you're a man, no. Which is why the attempted suicide rate of women is supposed to be higher. But I mean,
listen. I've had experience of this, and it's not been my experience that if somebody threatens to kill themselves because they have a mental illness, it is taken seriously, whatever gender they happen to be. So I think that's slightly unfair. I don't know where people have been saying this to you, but I think if they go to the right places, they will get the help.
There might be a waiting list on the NHS, though. That's the thing.
The NHS is going down the toilet, and that's something we'll talk about at another time. So let's talk a bit about this Justice for Men. I think a lot of women would be very angry about this, particularly on International Women's Day, Mike. Is this a joke, or are you doing it seriously? I'm not talking about men being separated from their children. That's, in a way, another issue. But generally, men have it easier than women, don't they?
Well, no, on the contrary, James. I mean, I only need to refer to our last manifesto, in which we explored 20 areas where the human rights of men and boys in the UK today are assaulted by the state. And almost always...
Well, give me a few examples, Mike. Give me a few examples.
Okay, well, I've already mentioned circumcision, education, the education system.
Hang on, let's just talk about circumcision we talked about that the other night.
Yeah.
A lot of people find that humorous and think it's a bit of a joke. We both here have been circumcised. We don't know what it's like not to be circumcised, but we don't feel. Do you feel in any way emancipated?
No, it's not the same as female genital mutilation, is it?
Well, you don't know
No,
why.
you're quite right. All male genital mutilation is more injurious than almost all female genital mutilation. And anybody who thinks it's a joke, I suggest they watch a video that was presented at our last International Conference on Men's Issues, the Global Survey of Infant Circumcision Harm. And
but with female genital mutilation, they lose their total feeling, don't they?
So do men.
No, Ash,
we don't know, do we?
Ash, listen.
Ash, there's four types of female genital mutilation, and there are a number of subtypes. The reality is that the forms of FGM, which are more injurious than MGM, are rarely carried out. It's only feminist propaganda that would have you believe anything else.
So how many boy babies across the world do you think are, to use your own terms, Mike, are mutilated every year?
Well, something like I think about 25% of the males in the world are circumcised. So it runs into I guess it must be many hundreds of millions.
I mean, it is a fact they are mutilated. You can't argue with that as a fact.
But I mean, why is it allowed? I mean, sometimes I presume as a baby of the 50s I was circumcised because I think my parents thought that was the thing to do. It was more hygienic and it was something that.
Well, I've never felt I've suffered from it, but you know what I mean. If you don't think you've suffered, then your perception's what matters.
But hang on, Ash, you've got to think about it this way. If we say we think we've suffered, there may well be some monetary gain.
Right. Oh yeah.
But I mean, can I? I mean, just touching on the issue.
Maybe I am a bit traumatized.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Sorry. In terms of claims of medical benefits, I'd point anybody who believes that circumcision leads to medical benefits to read three pieces by the blogger William Collins, and he debunks every one of them. There is not a claimed medical benefit for male circumcision that actually stands an examination.
All right. Well, then I think it's about time it was stopped.
HIV transmission is more likely in an uncircumcised. Isn't that true?
No, I mean, the likelihood, certainly in Africa, where they're circumcising 20 million sub-Saharan males, the research evidence on which that is based is appalling. It is really, really paper thin, and it's quite likely because when men have. So when they're circumcised, they believe they can't acquire STDs, particularly HIV.
Well, you can, but it's a less chance because of less blood, less ripping and stuff like that.
Right, but the problem is that they then stop using condoms, which of course increases the problem. So
of course it will, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about male circumcision. Let's move on to some of the other problems that men. I mean, it's not taken seriously by women at all. This I know, but just as it's International Women's Day, we might as well carry on. You said education. Tell me in what way boys are missing out in education.
Okay, well, I mean, many of your listeners will be aware that 30 years ago, O levels were replaced by GCSEs. And the reason that happened was that teachers' pro-girl bias could then manifest itself in continuous assessment. And again, going back to William Collins, he's produced a paper which shows that the education gender gap emerged in 1987.
By the way?
William Collins is, well, in my view, the most important blogger in the world on gender issues, and he's speaking at the International Conference on Men's Issues in July in London.
Well, we'll get him on. He'd be a good guest, wouldn't he?
I mean, is he like an academic of it? Is he a blogger? Is that what he's known for?
He's a blogger, but the sheer depth of all his pieces are just astonishing.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. We'll speak to him. Yeah.
I'm concerned also that you say I'm not sure. I think you'll find that guys do okay as far as education is concerned. Anyway, I never did very well at education. It's never really held me back. It's all a question of how much you want to do something. In fact, talking to a feminist last night who said that one of the reasons why women don't seem to get many of the top jobs is that when there's a top job, a man will go for a job even if he's only 60% sure that he can do it, and a woman would have to be at least 80 to 85% sure she could do the job before she would even have a go at it. And I said, well, that's lack of ambition then, isn't it?
It is. And it's also just one of countless feminist myths. The reason that men dominate at the top of businesses and politics and so on has been known for almost 20 years now. Dr. Catherine Hakim, who's a world-renowned sociologist, produced a paper in the year 2000 on what she called preference theory. And that showed that 4 in 7 British men are work-centred, but only 1 in 7 British women is work-centred.
Yeah.
So you'd expect an 80-20 split on, let's say, corporate boards, just for that one issue alone.
And you see, another thing that I'm concerned about, and nobody seems to talk about much, is I'm concerned that a lot of women do want to be mothers, to bring their children up, to nurture them. And quite often they are looked down upon by other women. Yeah. It is usually women that complain when a mother is breastfeeding her child in public. And I think that is something that needs to be readdressed. I think we ought, as a nation, we ought to value motherhood. It's not something a man can do. They can, when needs must, they can try, but you
can wear one of those things that lactate.
No, I was thinking when maybe your wife dies or something, then you can you have to make sure you do it. But a woman has instincts, and I'm sorry if this is sounding very sexist, but I'm sorry, this is the way it is, and I think the state, if you're on a low income and you can't afford for both parents to be at home, then there ought to be some way that you get some money to stay at home to look after your child if that's what you want to do.
I couldn't agree more,
I was
James.
speaking for women there, wasn't I, really?
Yeah. No, the state is very hostile towards stay-at-home mothers.
Yeah, and I think that's appalling. I think that's one of the most difficult and most important jobs that's done. Unless you bring children up properly, you end up with just a bigger audience for Jeremy Kyle.
Agreed.
You're right, yeah.
What else does Justice for or J for MB do then? I mean, do you not think that men have?
Sorry, James, just going to mention domestic violence. It's been known for a very long time that the numbers of victims of domestic violence, the numbers of men and women are similar. That something like 99% of resources available to help victims of domestic violence go towards women.
Well, I think it was. I think no.
Yeah,
I
but
think
women die a lot more often in domestic incidents than men
I think
do.
figures given out today said that something like 13% of domestic violence was against women. 13% was against men. The rest was against women. So it's not 50-50.
No, James, that is nonsense. The national statistics, what are they called? The Office for National Statistics shows something like 60% of female reporting and 40% male. But men are known to underreport far more than women, being the victims of domestic violence.
Yeah, but a lot of women are killed by their partners. I think it's 2 every 3 or 4 nights. It's something like that. And there's very rarely is there a man. I mean, it does happen, but a man is killed by a woman.
But that's like 100 people a year, Ash. That is not.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of people. And they're mainly women killed by men. Hardly any.
Yeah, but the resources should be there, whoever it is.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can use that as a. I mean, that is a terrible.
It's a lot more serious, when a man is hitting a woman in general because of the physical difference. I mean, it's not always, but.
Well, I think you should tell that to Ian. I think you should tell that to Ian McNichol, who'll be speaking at our conference in July. He nearly lost an arm following an attack with a hammer.
Well, there are some. I know. I've met some crazy women.
Yeah, but I mean, you can find exceptions to every rule. But do you not think that generally? Do you not think? Well, there must be support for them, like there's support for everybody.
Yeah. There is a bit of mocking, isn't there? If a man is, there is a bit, and it can be very serious.
That's why they won't report it. And an awful lot of 90% of the street homeless are men, and being the victims of domestic violence is one of the reasons for that. And street homelessness robs the average person on the street of 30 years of life expectancy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, do you not think? I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here a little bit, obviously, in the interests of balance. Do you not think the way that generally women have been treated over the years, they're just getting a bit of their own back now?
No, I think women have always been a privileged class, and British women and girls today are among the most privileged human beings who've ever walked the planet.
Well, I'll throw that out there and see what other people have to say about that. Thank you very much indeed, Mike Buchanan, who's leader of Justice for Men and Boys, which is a political party, and maybe something we need to reflect on here on International Women's Day.
But the reason I rang up is, off the back of what Mike Buchanan, I think it was, said.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of fuss that goes on about International Women's Day.
A lot of fuss.
And a lot of fuss. And I mean,
more so this year than ever before.
Shop, which I shan't name, at least not on air, has been doing a promotion about International Women's Day. What I would like to do is also invite people to celebrate International Men's Day, which is on November the 19th. I mean, if you're going to celebrate one, you might as well celebrate the other. It's only fair. It's only equal. I'm only asking for equality here. No special treatment.
Yeah. And do you have anything to do with it, Mike?
What, International Men's Day?
Yeah.
No, as an organizer, no, absolutely not.
Well, what happened on it? I don't remember it. Was there a parade or something?
Nobody talked about it.
Why wasn't there a parade?
See, this is exactly my point. You would not know that it's going on. It's not reported in the papers. The BBC, who are infamously, well, let's not go into that. They're politically correct, I think, probably.
So politically correct that if you're a woman, you've got a lot more chance of getting a job. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then you complain about how badly you're paid, although your agent should have done a better deal for you.
And you get more money.
And you didn't. And and then you get paid more, and then they don't dare sack you. Yeah.
Well, that's right. I mean, this whole business about women being, about feminism being for women, it is not for women. Feminism hates women. This is about power.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Equality is a scam that the whole thing is built on the back of it. I mean, you talk about women in positions of power. Look at the women we have now in positions of power and have had. The woman is the head of state, the Queen herself. At the moment, we have a female prime minister, because before that, and more famously, and perhaps more competently, some would say, Mrs. Thatcher.
I think a lot more competently. But
no one would argue with that. I mean, even
and it is the Scottish First Minister, and Nicola, what's her name, is a woman.
Sturgeon,
the head of the Metropolitan Police is a woman.
Right.
The Secretary is a woman.
It's all gone too far, hasn't it?
Amber Rudd, yes.
Listen. Is a woman. So
the problem is
there is no glass ceiling purely on grounds of being a woman. The fact is that women tend not to want the kind of jobs that men go for. Women want their families. They want to look after their children, so they're looking for part-time jobs. Being prime minister is not really compatible with part-time
having
working.
A child. No. And the other thing is that most of the women who complain about it aren't women who want those jobs, and probably aren't women who are capable of doing those jobs. They're just being reactionary for the sake of it.
Yes, I can't speak for those women, but that is probably a lot of truth in that. But Mike, I think, was also speaking about female circumcision. I mean, the worst kind of female circumcision is pretty bad. It's called infibulation, in which the whole lot is removed. But there's at least
disgusting.
4 degrees. It is disgusting, and I'm absolutely against it. But most female circumcision is just cutting outer parts, and outer lips to some degree or another, and I'm not in favour of that.
No, that's disgusting too. And what about the reason for male circumcision? Forget for one moment the ridiculous religious ideas, because that's just balmy, as far as I'm concerned. But is there a medical reason? As I was circumcised because in the 50s they thought that was the sort of thing you should do to your boys.
Well, I was born in the 50s, and my parents did not think it was a fit thing to do, but that was just my good luck.
I see you were unlucky.
My view is there is no reason for, and no medical reason for circumcision. I mean, people talk about hygiene, but soap and water is the answer. Soap and water once a day, or preferably twice a day, but once is enough, is all you need to maintain any sort of reasonable hygiene.
Mind you, I have seen what men
if you get your hands
with those
dirty,
bits
sorry,
have to do.
Martin,
Yeah, it's disgusting, isn't it, James?
if you get your hands dirty, what do you do? Do you cut them off?
Keep it up what?
If you get your hands dirty, what do? Do you cut them off?
No, listen, I've got to leave it there, Mike.
No, but you trim your fingernails.
Good to talk to you, Mike. Thank you very much. Yeah.